Tommy Boyle had been talking about the fairground on the edge of Javea for days. He had seen the neon lights glowing in the distance and could hear the carnival music wafting through the air. He begged his mother, Angelica, to take him there, but she knew she couldn't.
Mummy, can we go to the fairground today?
Tommy asked, his eyes pleading. Angelica hesitated before replying. She knew she had to go there on her own for a reason she couldn't disclose to her son.
Not today, Tommy. I'm sorry,
she said gently.
But Mummy, you promised we could go.
Tommy protested, his lower lip trembling.
I know, but something important has come up, and I have to go alone.
Angelica explained, hoping her son would understand. Tommy looked crestfallen, but he knew when his mother had made up her mind.
Okay, Mummy. But can you tell me why you have to go alone?
He asked, curiosity getting the better of him.
I'm sorry, Tommy. It's something I can't talk about right now.
Angelica replied, not wanting to worry her son unnecessarily. Tommy nodded, knowing not to push his mother further.
Okay, Mummy. But you'll tell me later, right?
Of course, Tommy. I promise.
Angelica assured him, hoping to ease his mind. As Angelica made her way to the fairground alone, her thoughts were consumed by the task she had decided to carry out. The warm Spanish evening was in full swing, and the fairground was alive with the sound of laughter, screams, and the clanging of metal as the various rides operated. The bright neon lights illuminated the night sky, casting a colorful glow across the entire area. The main attraction was the towering Ferris wheel that dominated the center of the fairground, beckoning visitors from all around. As people made their way to the Ferris wheel, they could see the long queue snaking around the ride, with eager revelers waiting patiently for their turn. The Ferris wheel was a towering masterpiece of engineering, reaching high into the sky and offering spectacular views of the surrounding area. The cabins were spacious and comfortable, with glass windows that provided an unobstructed view of the town of Javea, the beach and the sea below. The rides were all brightly decorated and lit up with multicolored lights, creating a vibrant and festive atmosphere. The air was filled with the sounds of carnival music, and the enticing smells of sugary treats wafted through the air. It was impossible not to feel a sense of excitement and wonder while walking through the fairground. As the sun began to set, the place truly came to life. The neon lights became even brighter, casting long shadows across the ground. The cooler evening air brought a refreshing change from the heat of the day, and people were out in force, enjoying the lively atmosphere. The Ferris wheel continued to be the main attraction, with people of all ages lining up for a chance to experience the breathtaking views from the top. As they ascended higher and higher, they could see the lights twinkling below, and the stunning skyline stretching out into the distance. It was an unforgettable experience, and one that many visitors would remember for years to come. For those who preferred a more adrenaline-fueled experience, there were plenty of rides that catered to thrill seekers. The roller coasters twisted and turned through the air, with heart-pumping drops and exhilarating speeds that left riders breathless. The screams of excitement could be heard from all around as riders were whisked through the air at breakneck speeds. But the fairground was not just for thrill seekers. Families with young children also found plenty of rides and activities to keep them entertained. The spinning teacups were a firm favorite, as were the gentle train rides that took passengers on a scenic tour of the fairground. As the night wore on, the fairground continued to buzz with excitement and energy. The crowd swelled, and the air was filled with the sounds of carnival games and live music. People laughed and chatted as they walked between the rides and attractions, enjoying the warm Spanish evening and the unique atmosphere of the fairground. Angelica made her way through the throngs of people at the fairground, her eyes scanning the crowd for a certain man. She knew she had to be careful. This man was a suspect in a crime, and she didn't want to alert him to her presence. As she walked, Angelica's thoughts turned to the man she was looking for. His name was Carlos, and he had a reputation as a dangerous criminal. Angelica had heard that he had been involved in a recent murder. As always, she was determined to get to the bottom of it. Finally, she spotted him. Carlos was walking ahead of her, his broad shoulders and muscular frame making him stand out in the crowd. He was accompanied by two other men, both of whom Angelica guessed were members of his gang. Angelica trailed behind Carlos, trying to come up with a plan. She knew she had to be careful. If Carlos found out that she was snooping around, he would likely flee. As she walked, Angelica couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She had a knack for spotting liars and criminals, and something about Carlos made her uneasy. He seemed to radiate danger and unpredictability. Angelica followed Carlos and his associates for several minutes, contemplating how she would approach him. She needed to be subtle, she couldn't simply confront him. She needed to gather evidence first. She decided to approach him. She fell back a few paces and cleared her throat, trying to sound casual.
"Excuse me,"
she said, tapping Carlos on the shoulder. Carlos turned around, his eyes narrowing.
"What do you want?"
he growled. Angelica took a deep breath, trying to keep her cool.
"I just wanted to ask you if you've seen a man with a white dog. He was here a few minutes ago."
"No!"
Carlos stated with intent, his head moving menacingly towards Angelica. It was the move she wanted, confirming beyond all doubt that this was the man she wanted to speak to. The muscular man striding through the fairground as though he owned it was indeed the man that she believed had killed a homeless man and left his body on the beach a few days earlier. She guessed that Carlos thought the tide would take the body away and hide the crime. Carlos got his tides wrong. The body was there for the police to early find the following morning.
"There's a reward,"
Angelica stated.
"I don't need your stinking money."
Carlos sneered, turning his back on Angelica and walking away with his associates.
Part 1 over. Angelica muttered to herself when she was sure the criminal was out of earshot. All she had to do now was find a secluded place to talk to Carlos and find out what he knew. She followed at a distance. Angelica didn't need to get too near to Carlos and his gang because their presence was obvious wherever they stood. There was always a commotion surrounding the group, whistling at women, hassling ride owners and spitting drink out onto the ground. Angelica kept a remoteness and followed their actions. She had time on her side. Tommy was being looked after by her kindly neighbor Mariana. Angelica would just bide her time. She knew her chance would come. The hangers-on left and Carlos made his way to the queue for the Ferris wheel. Angelica saw this as her opportunity. She knew the operator of the ride, Pedro. His son was in Tommy's class, and they both played for the same football team. Angelica went over and had a quick word with the operator of the ride. "Pedro,"
Angelica said, approaching him with a smile.
"How are you?"
"I'm good, Angelica. What brings you to the fairground today?"
Pedro asked, returning her smile. Angelica hesitated for a moment, wondering how best to approach the delicate topic.
"Actually, Pedro, I was wondering if I could ride the Ferris wheel with someone special,"
she said, trying to sound casual.
"Sure. Who did you have in mind?"
Pedro asked, looking at Angelica curiously. Angelica pointed towards a man who was standing some distance away, watching the people queuing for the ride.
"Carlos,"
she said, her voice lowering to a whisper. Pedro's face fell slightly, and he looked at Angelica with concern.
"Angelica, are you sure about this? Carlos is a dangerous man."
"I know, Pedro. But I have to talk to him. It's important,"
Angelica replied, her tone firm. Pedro looked hesitant, but he ultimately relented.
"Okay, I'll let you on the ride with him. But be careful, Angelica,"
he warned.
"Thank you. Oh, and one more thing. Can you stop the ride when we're at the top?
"Are you sure?"
I just need some time with him. He's not going to hurt me when he's got to get off the ride with me at the other end. I'll scream blue murder and he'll never get out of the fairground. Anyway, you'll be at the bottom to help me if I'm in distress,"
Angelica teased. Pedro nodded the affirmative and smiled a nervous smile. He had only spoken to Angelica a handful of times before, but Pedro had never met a more determined person. Angelica thanked Pedro and made her way over to Carlos, who was now in line for the Ferris wheel. She joined him in the queue and waited patiently, trying to look calm and collected. It was her acting skills that had got Angelica through many situations like this in the recent past. She hoped that the display would hold up. The queue moved at a decent pace, and within 10 minutes, Angelica was at the front of the line, barring the large figure of Carlos. As the man boarded, Angelica slipped into the compartment behind him, and Pedro stepped in front of the rest of the queue to ensure that there were only 2 occupants. Angelica was ready to enact the second part of her plan.
Evening.
Carlos stated, sitting down. He then realized that this was someone he had already spoken to that evening.
Did you find your man? And the dog?
No. I guess they must have gone home, she replied, trying to brush off their previous encounter because it was spurious. She had no substance to back it up.
And I guess that means the reward is still up for grabs.
Carlos responded.
No. I've spent it.
Angelica replied. Angelica and Carlos took their seats in the Ferris wheel car and, as the ride started, Angelica initiated a conversation.
Lovely evening, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Perfect weather for a fairground visit.
Absolutely. Have you been to this fair before?
No, it's my first time here. What about you?
Oh, I've been here a few times with my son. He loves the rides and games.
I see. I'm here with some friends. They convinced me to come along.
Well, it's always nice to try something new, isn't it?
Carlos nodded in agreement, and the conversation paused for a moment as they took in the view from the top of the Ferris wheel. Angelica took the opportunity to observe Carlos's body language and behavior, looking for any signs of guilt.
Do you live around here?
Yes, I do. I've lived in Javea for a few years now.
It's a beautiful town, isn't it? So peaceful and quiet.
Yes, it is. That's why I moved here. I needed a break from the hustle and bustle of the city.
I can understand that. Do you work here as well?
No, I work in Valencia. I commute every day.
Angelica nodded and continued to listen, trying to make him feel comfortable while watching for any signs of nervousness or guilt.
So, what do you do for work?
I work in finance. It can be stressful, but it pays the bills.
I can imagine. It must take a lot of focus and dedication.
Yes, it does. But I enjoy it. Keeps me on my toes.
As the ride came to a stop, Angelica took a deep breath and prepared to ask the questions that had been weighing on her mind.
Hey Carlos, have you heard anything about the homeless man found dead on Javea Beach a few days ago?
I'm not sure. I think I might have heard something about it on the news.
Really? I thought it was a big deal around here. Don't you think it's weird that someone was found dead on the beach?
I don't really want to talk about it.
But we live so close to the beach, Carlos. Don't you want to know if there's something we should be worried about?
Look, I'm sure the authorities are handling it. It's not our place to get involved. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay, I understand. But are you sure you haven't heard anything else? I just want to make sure we're safe.
Poor guy. Head battered in. At least he didn't leave anyone behind.
Angelica stored this information. The actual details of the death hadn't been released by the police. She had the upper hand now, waiting for Carlos to tie himself into even more knots.
Head? I'd heard that it was a knife to the throat that did the damage. Funny how rumors make their way around a small town like this.
I have it on good authority that it was the head. Hammer. Brick, something like that.
Carlos stated, watching Angelica intently. It was at this point his brain clicked into gear and informed him that the ride had stopped moving. The background behind Angelica's head was static. Carlos had no idea how long this had been the case.
And I'm sure you won't be surprised that I have it on good authority that it was you who killed the homeless man. His name is Brian Anderson. Ring any bells?
Why would I know that name? Whose authority?
Lots of questions, when I actually want answers myself. Why don't we play a little game, Carlos?
Why do I get the impression that you're already playing a little game with me?
Carlos demanded. Angelica ignored him. She was calling the shots now.
Carlos, we'll play I answer, you answer. You get to ask a question. I will answer totally honestly. And then I get to ask a question. And you have to answer with the truth. How does that sound?
They do get so noisy, she said. They're disappointed because they couldn't go to see the hanging, that's what it is. I'm too busy to take them. And Tom won't be back from work in time. Why can't we go and see the hanging? Roared the boy in his huge voice. Want to see the hanging? Want to see the hanging? Chanted the little girl, still capering round. Some Eurasian prisoners, guilty of war crimes, were to be hanged in the park that evening, Winston remembered. This happened about once a month, and was a popular spectacle. Children always clamored to be taken to see it. He took his leave of Mrs. Parsons and made for the door. But he had not gone 6 steps down the passage when something hit the back of his neck, an agonizingly painful blow. It was as though a red-hot wire had been jabbed into him. He spun round just in time to see Mrs. Parsons dragging her son back into the doorway while the boy pocketed a catapult. Goldstein, bellowed the boy as the door closed on him. But what most struck Winston was the look of helpless fright on the woman's greyish face. Back in the flat, he stepped quickly past the telescreen and sat down at the table again, still rubbing his neck. The music from the telescreen had stopped. Instead, a clipped military voice was reading out, with a sort of brutal relish, a description of the armaments of the new floating fortress which had just been anchored between Iceland and the Faroe Islands. With those children, he thought, that wretched woman must lead a life of terror. Another year, 2 years, and they would be watching her night and day for symptoms of unorthodoxy. Nearly all children nowadays were horrible. What was worst of all was that by means of such organizations as the spies, they were systematically turned into ungovernable little savages, and yet this produced in them no tendency whatever to rebel against the discipline of the party. On the contrary, they adored the party and everything connected with it. The songs, the processions, the banners, the hiking, the drilling with dummy rifles, the yelling of slogans, the worship of Big Brother, it was all a sort of glorious game to them. All their ferocity was turned outwards, against the enemies of the state, against foreigners, traitors, saboteurs, thought criminals. It was almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children, and with good reason, for hardly a week passed in which the Times did not carry a paragraph describing how some eavesdropping little sneak, child hero was the phrase generally used, had overheard some compromising remark and denounced its parents to the thought police. The sting of the catapult bullet had worn off. He picked up his pen half-heartedly, wondering whether he could find something more to write in the diary. Suddenly he began thinking of O'Brien again. Years ago, how long was it? 7 years it must be. He had dreamed that he was walking through a pitch-dark room. And someone sitting to one side of him had said as he passed, "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness." It was said very quietly, almost casually, a statement, not a command. He had walked on without pausing. What was curious was that at the time, in the dream, the words had not made much impression on him. It was only later and by degrees that they had seemed to take on significance. He could not now remember whether it was before or after having the dream that he had seen O'Brien for the first time, nor could he remember when he had first identified the voice as O'Brien's. But at any rate the identification existed. It was O'Brien who had spoken to him out of the dark. Winston had never been able to feel sure. Even after this morning's flash of the eyes, it was still impossible to be sure whether O'Brien was a friend or an enemy. Nor did it even seem to matter greatly. There was a link of understanding between them, more important than affection or partisanship. "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness," he had said. Winston did not know what it meant, only that in some way or another it would come true. The voice from the telescreen paused. A trumpet call, clear and beautiful, floated into the stagnant air. The voice continued raspingly, "Attention! Your attention, please! A news flash has this moment arrived from the Malabar front. Our forces in South India have won a glorious victory. I am authorized to say that the action we are now reporting may well bring the war within measurable distance of its end. Here is the news flash. Bad news coming, thought Winston. And sure enough, following on a gory description of the annihilation of a Eurasian army, with stupendous figures of killed and prisoners, came the announcement that, as from next week, the chocolate ration would be reduced from 30 grams to 20. Winston belched again. The gin was wearing off, leaving a deflated feeling. The telescreen, perhaps to celebrate the victory, perhaps to drown the memory of the lost chocolate, crashed into Oceania. "'Tis for thee. You were supposed to stand to attention." However, in his present position he was invisible. "Oceania, 'tis for thee" gave way to lighter music. Winston walked over to the window, keeping his back to the telescreen. The day was still cold and clear. Somewhere far away a rocket bomb exploded with a dull, reverberating roar. About 20 or 30 of them a week were falling on London at present.